Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about all of the books that I read in August. August was super successful for my TBR. I read all of the books except for The Death and Life of the Great Lakes. I did start this one. I'm only 8 pages in, but I am currently reading the last book on my August TBR. It is September 1st when I'm filming this, so I would categorize August as a successful reading month. I read all of these physical books. So I have 7 physical books. I finished 2 audiobooks and 2 ebooks for a grand total of 11 books, right? 7, 2, and 2, yeah. A grand total of 11 books that were finished in the month of August. So that is very exciting. And I also started book journaling. So what I've been doing is as I finish a book, I have the title, the author, the dates that I read it, and then just any thoughts that I have about the book. So either about the plot, any thoughts or feelings I had while reading it, any connections that I made to other books maybe that I was reading. And so I'm really enjoying book journaling, and I had this really awesome, beautiful journal from Archer and Olive that I'd gotten, and I thought what better way to use this beautiful journal than to fill it with something that I love, which is books. So that's also something that I started in August. Okay, without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to start with my audiobooks and my ebooks, and I'll go through my stack of physical books. So the 2 audiobooks that I finished in the month of August, the first one that I finished, I lied. I finished 3 audiobooks. I missed one. So I had a grand total of 12 books that I finished. The first one that I finished was D-Day Girls. This is a nonfiction book about the women spies that were like dropped into occupied France during World War II. It was really interesting. It gave me a different perspective on history that's not always told. So that was really interesting. The second audiobook that I finished was The Murder of Mr. Wickham. This is the first book in a trilogy or series. I'm not quite sure. I'd actually already listened to the audiobook of the second one, and that one refers back to this first one quite a bit. This was a hold that I made when I realized I had listened to the second one, not the first one. So I put that one on hold, and it came available I think towards the end of July, and then I finished it up in August. This one was okay. I had a lot of similar feelings that I did to the first one. The plot itself takes about 25% of the book to get into. There's too many characters, and I feel like the book was trying to do too much. The actual like mystery part of the story I really enjoyed, and I thought that was really well done. A lot of the other parts I didn't quite enjoy. And then the final audiobook that I finished in August was Morewood Family Rules. This book was so fun. It has some like mystery elements to it. It reminded me a lot of Confessions of the Sullivan Sisters, except for like an adult version of that book. So it's a rich family that got their wealth through nefarious ways, so by scamming people pretty much. And the main character returns after a stint in prison, and just kind of the way stuff unfolds from there. And then there's a mystery of like, how did she end up in prison in the first place and all of that. And I just thoroughly enjoyed it. It was funny, it was fun, it was fast-paced. When I wasn't listening to the audiobook, I was thinking about the book, so I just thoroughly enjoyed my time listening to that book. Then the 2 ebooks that I finished, the first one was Otherworld, and this is the start of a young adult series. It takes place both in the real world, and then a majority of the book takes place inside like a virtual reality video game. And the concept was really interestingly done. The video game aspects were very convincing. I love gaming. I love stepping into that world. I like watching people game, so I really enjoyed that aspect of it. The characters were really compelling in their interactions, and I just found it a really enjoyable and fast-paced read, and I will be continuing that series. The other ebook that I read was a loan that I had on hold from the library. It was Emma, not the original. It was a retelling by Alexander McCall Smith, and I absolutely hated this book. It was not, there was no plot. The characters were not likable or well developed. It was like there was alluding to like bigger plot points and deeper things, but it was all surface level. So it was a slog to get through this book, and I just kind of had to force myself to finish this book. It was not an enjoyable time, and I really don't know if I would even pick up anything else by this author because I just really did not enjoy this book. However, so now that I'm done with the stuff that I need from here, I'm going to go through my stack of physical books that I finished in the month of August. And we will speed this up a little bit, and this is in no particular order. It's just the order that I grabbed them off of my shelves. So the first book that I have here is The True Love Bookshop. I really enjoyed this book. It was such a, I'm going to say light read. However, there are some heavier topics that are dealt with in it. There's grief, there's infidelity, but there is like a whole like light love story that kind of goes along with that, and it was such an enjoyable read, and it was like just what I needed at the time, so it like filled that piece. And I don't know why I kept putting this book off to read, but I'm glad I picked it up and finally read it and had an enjoyable time, and I would love to read more by this author. I think this is part of some interconnected standalone, so I might delve into that world when I get through more of the books on my list. The next book that I have is The Book Eaters. I, again, loved this book. It was very different than all of the things that I had been reading. It takes place in England, and it is about these families that instead of eating food, they eat books. And then there's also a part of the families that eats brains pretty much. So it's like this kind of weird mix of like how those pieces fit in to both these families and into the greater world. There's a little bit of mystery woven in, and the way that this story is told from present day and then in the past, and then every time you're going back to the past perspective, it is moving slower and slower towards, or moving closer and closer towards that present day. And so by the end it all comes together, so you're kind of seeing where we're at and how we got there. So I really enjoyed the storytelling aspect of this, and I liked the concept, and yeah, it was like a little bit weird but so enjoyable weird. The next book that I have is Code Talker. This was a reread for me. I read this book in high school. I got this book for free, and so then I'm gonna donate it to a little free library. But I enjoy the storytelling in this, and it was, again, just a nice quick reread for me. I think it took me maybe 2 days to get through. Again, it's telling a story from a perspective that doesn't always get told. So it is about the Navajo code talkers during World War II. And this book is told from the perspective of a grandfather telling this story to his grandchildren. So again, the storytelling is beautiful. Would highly recommend reading this book. Another book that I finished was Educated. This was a borrowed book to me. This is a memoir, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect going into this book. It had been sitting on my shelf for a long time, and I think I kept putting it off because I wasn't sure what to expect from it, and I had heard some mixed things in the past when this first came out. However, I ended up really reading this really quickly. I really enjoyed it. It was an interesting take onto somebody else's life perspective. There were some culty aspects to it, and just like the journey, or watching somebody else's life journey through their eyes and their perspective, I think is always something useful that all of us can take in. And I feel like this book was also very well written. So I would recommend this read if you haven't already. It gives that different perspective on a life that may be very different from your own. As you can see, overall, I had a very good reading month. I'm gonna say the only books that I really didn't enjoy was the one audiobook and then that ebook. Another book that I finished, and I finished this on August 31st. I read it pretty much in one day, is Mysterious Benedict Society and the Perilous Journey. This is the second book in the Benedict Society series. I read the first book in June or July. I can't remember. I borrowed that from my library as an ebook, and this one followed a very similar format. I do think I'm a little bit outside of the intended audience, so I didn't quite get as much out of it. I do think it's a little bit long, and like I said, the format was very much the same as the first book. You have like the beginning with the kids, and then they go on this journey or this thing, and then by the format of the end is very much the same as well. I'm assuming the next 2 books in the series are also going to be that way. I will finish the series because I have a hard time not finishing things. It was a fun time. It's not a hard read. I don't know if I'd recommend because I am kind of outside of the scope of this book. It's definitely a middle grade, and it's just a fun kind of fantasy-esque middle grade. And then the last 2 books that I finished in August were some pretty impactful books for me. I finished American Prometheus, The Triumphant Tragedy of J. Robert Oppenheimer. I started this book in the middle of July, and it took me about to the middle of August to finish this. This is a very dense nonfiction book. It's about 600 pages of actual written work. And it is the story of his entire life, and like how he got to the point where he became one of the most popular physicists in the world, and the impacts of some of the choices and that he makes, and all of that. And it was just a very well written book. I can see why it won a Pulitzer Prize. It's very well written. It feels like reading somebody's like PhD work. It is just so well done. The accounts that are in there and the storytelling throughout that have created such an impact, and the world that we are living in currently is because of things that Oppenheimer did and choices that he made have significantly impacted the world and the trajectory of it. So it's definitely worth a read. It will take a lot of time. I figured it might take me about a month to read this just because it's very dense, but I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and I am so glad that I finally read it and have added it to my collection. And then the final book that I finished in August, and you can see it's pretty well annotated. I read this book for my book study group. It is Pretty by Keith F. Miller Jr. And this is a book about two Black queer boys in the South. I believe it's Savannah, Georgia. I think it's Savannah, Georgia. Can't remember specifically, but it's in the South, and there's a piece of gang affiliation, and it's really like a coming of age story for these two boys. It's told from both their perspectives, and it's told in their voice. I think this is a really important and powerful book to read because it is told from the perspective of people's voices who are not always heard in mainstream media, and it's told with a voice that's not always heard from mainstream media. So for example, I want to get this right, Leroy, who's one of our main characters, the way that he speaks is very much affiliated with his culture. And so the way that he is written and the way that he speaks is written and thinks is in that speech pattern. This is the first book in a duology. The second book comes out in January, which I will be purchasing when it comes out so I can have this. And yeah, it's really like that coming of age, figuring out who you are, both in the context of yourself, but and in the context of your community, and how those two things intersect with one another, and the stories and voices that you amplify and are told through that. So definitely, if you have not read this, pick it up and read it. There is some violence in this book, so if that's not something that you feel comfortable reading about, I would be cautious there, but definitely worth a read and a pickup to hear their stories. So that is all of the books that I have read in the month of August. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.